I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all. I'm blickety black, blacker than black, black, I'm blacker than black, yo, because I'm black and I'm back. Yo, I'm black and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blickety black, 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 I'm black, 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 y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, cause I'm black.
The Mau Mau Uprising was a revolt against colonial rule in Kenya that took place in 1952 to 1960 and is now regarded by some as the single most important event in Kenya's independence from British rule. More than 1 million strong by the start of the 50s, the Kikuyu, Kenya's largest ethnic group, were extensively economically marginalized as a result of white settler expansion. They face issues like the expulsion of Kikuyu tenants from settler farms, loss of land to white settlers, poverty, and lack of true political representation, which later led to the revolt. The colonial history of Kenya dates back to the Berlin Conference in 1885, when East Africa was first divided into territories by Europeans. The British government founded the East African Protectorate in 1895 and soon after opened the fertile highlands to white settlers. Kenya was officially declared a British colony in 1920. In these colonies, Africans and Asians were banned from political participation. In 1942, members of Kikuyu, Embu, Meru, and Kamba tribes came together and formed the Mau Mau to fight for freedom.
The meaning of the word Mau Mau is often disputed, but is generally thought to actually be an anagram of Uma Uma, which is a military code word that means get out, get out. Some attribute the name to be a range of mountains bordering the Rift Valley.
The Mau Mau was basically the political heir of the associations that thrived in the 1920s. At that moment, the land problem was unbearable. They took oaths saying things like, "May I be struck down if I refuse to bring the head of any white that I am asked." So these guys were no joke when they said that they were taking back what was rightfully theirs.
And the British did not take this lightly. In 1953, the suspected leader of the group, Jomo Kenyatta, was arrested and jailed for 7 years for leading the group. As well, another Kikuyu fighter, Dedan Kimathi, was arrested in 1956 for his affiliation with the Mau Mau. He was later hanged by colonialists.
Although the uprising was directed primarily against British colonial forces and the white settler community, much of the violence took place between rebel and loyalist Africans. Because of that, the uprising often appeared to be a civil war between the African population. It was a civil war, but also a war about independence.
The division between the two groups stemmed from many Kikuyu fighters who were either for or against the violent uprising. Not only having different viewpoints on the revolt, but the Mau Mau fighters believed some Africans who were referred to as loyalists during the time were actually working in collaboration with the British. Now, the fact of the matter is, in many of these cases, Kenyans did side with the British, due to them not wanting to commit acts of violence in order to gain their independence.
The uprising began to take shape when more radical Kikuyu militants were invited into the nationalist Kenya African Union called the Mahunyu. The Mahunyu was a political group whose intentions were more militant than the previous groups. So you have these two groups now fighting against each other in different ways, but fighting for the same cause. And obviously these two sides clash with such conflicting views on how to handle these issues.
The war officially began in October 1952, and in November of the same year, the Mau Mau declared open rebellion against British forces. They formed armies based in the mountains and forest areas and operated primarily at night. They would sneak into villages and kill Kikuyu families who supported the British, in addition to white landowners. Both sides showed violent behavior, sparking much controversy and inconsistent support amongst the Kikuyu.
The Kikuyu fighters were, attacking political opponents, raiding white settler farms, and destroying livestock. After the violence started, the British declared a state of emergency and sent in British troops. The British responded by rounding up massive amounts of suspected Mau Mau fighters and supporters. A large number of people were hung, and numbers up to 150,000 Kikuyu were held in the detention camps.
It seemed as if the British had far more harsh intentions than just detaining the Kikuyu fighters. In response to the murder and arson being committed, upon being captured, many Kenyans who were alleged Kikuyu fighters were subjected to malicious torture. In addition to being hanged, many were raped and subjected to castration as well.
After years of battle and disagreement, the parties involved engaged in the largest single massacre in Lari on March 26, 1953.
There was a lot of bloodshed. We're talking a good number of bodies. 74 people were killed and about 50 wounded. The massacre caused some retaliatory acts by home guard settlers and colonial forces.
By the time 1956 came around, many of the Kikuyu fighters had been silenced or detained. The suspects who were still in the detention camps remained there until the state of emergency was lifted. Now, what happened to these prisoners while in captivity gained huge negative coverage and condemnation. The Holy Camp Massacre was another focal point in the uprising. It actually showed how the colonial authorities would abuse their power. Many of these prisoners held in the Holy Camps were considered the most solid of the Kikuyu. The British tried to brainwash them in order to get them to submit to British rule, and those who refused were either severely injured or badly maimed. In fact, the Human Rights Commission says that 90,000 Kenyans were either tortured, killed, or injured during the uprising.
Around 1957 to 1960, the forest armies were dismantled and the state of emergency ended.
A few years after, the Mau Mau finally got what they had hoped for: political power and representation. Kenya was able to push through for the country's liberation, and Jomo Kenyatta, the person jailed for leading the Mau Mau, was elected prime minister in the republic's first ever all-inclusive elections in May of 1963. He later served as president. Today, although Kenya has its independence, many citizens are still affected by what happened in the camps, like Mwenge Kenyari, who now cannot have children.
Ndarekio hathi onda hulio kirato giki githugo mathakame macokire ndaruta nguo ngĩikahana ngĩmĩo gũkũ nĩo ndacokire ngĩhũrwo mũno na ndekĩimba.
What do you feel in your heart now about the men that did this to you?
I feel very, very bad. If they had just killed me, I would have been at peace. Instead, they gave me so much pain. I couldn't have children. I'm poor. I'm just a piece of scrap.
Like Kenyari, many elderly Kenyans are still living with the effects of the physical abuse and the marginalization into poor and resource-stripped communities. In 2012, the High Courts of the United Kingdom allowed for these people to sue for reparations. In June of 2013, the Huffington Post reported that 5,228 Kenyans were given a public apology and would be rewarded a total of nearly £20 million. Although there was much bloodshed and many lives lost, Kenya is still filled with proud, resilient people sharing their history, and is continuing to seek reparations and awareness for the horrors that occurred to Kenyans during the uprising.
Kenya,